Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here and for waiting patiently as we let people trickle in. We are now going to start with WEPA translations, explaining how we're going to be doing our simultaneous interpretation today. So I will throw it over to them and then we will get started.
Buenas noches a todos. Gracias por estar con nosotros esta noche. Próximamente vamos a comenzar con la explicación de cómo vamos a utilizar la función de interpretación en Zoom esta noche. Vamos a estar proveyendo interpretación al español. Si estás uniéndote a nosotros de una computadora, una vez enciendan la función de interpretación, vas a ver un globo que aparecerá a la parte inferior de tu pantalla. Haces clic en ese globo y de ahí seleccionas tu idioma, inglés o español. Good evening, everyone. If you're joining us from a computer, once the interpretation feature on Zoom is turned on, you will see a globe appearing on the bottom of your screen. You will click on that globe, and from that globe, you will choose your language, English or Spanish. You should choose a language even if you're bilingual. Even though speakers today will only be in English, if there's anybody participating in Spanish, you will not be able to hear them unless you choose a language channel. Si te estás uniendo a nosotros de un celular o tableta, no vas a ver el globo en la parte inferior de tu pantalla. Vas a ver 3 puntitos a la parte derecha inferior de tu pantalla que dice More o más. De esos 3 puntitos haces clic y va a salir un menú desplegable. En ese menú desplegable vas a deslizarte hasta donde dice Language Interpretation o interpretación de idiomas. Haces clic en eso y de ahí seleccionas tu idioma, inglés o español. Una vez hecho eso, puedes poner en silencio el audio original y para asegurarte que entres al salón tienes que darle clic a donde dice Done o finalizar en la parte superior derecha. If you're joining us from a cell phone or tablet, you will not see a globe at the bottom of your screen. Instead, you will go to the 3 dots that say More. You will click on them and a drop-down menu will appear. You will scroll down until it says Language Interpretation. Once you click on that, you will choose your language, English or Spanish, and then you might decide to mute original audio. After that, you have to click on Done to make sure that you are in the correct language room. Si te estás uniendo a nosotros de una Chromebook, desgraciadamente la función de interpretación de Zoom no funciona. Te recomendamos que salgas de la reunión y vuelvas a unirte por un celular o tableta. If you're joining us from a Chromebook tonight, we're sad to say that the Zoom interpretation feature is not available on Chromebooks. We recommend you leave the meeting and come back on your cell phone or tablet. Ya puedes prender la función, Noah. You can turn on interpretation.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm so glad to see so many of you here with us tonight. My name is Deb Silva. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. And I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us and our Community Advisory Board the launch of our recent report, I Just Want to Learn, Girls of Color and the School to Prison Pipeline in Massachusetts. You should be able to find the link to this report in the chat now. Before we truly begin, I have a few housekeeping matters to attend to. First, we have automatically muted all of you upon entry, and we ask that you remain muted until we open up the community discussion portion at the end of this event. We will also be moderating the chat, so feel free to make comments or ask questions as you think of them throughout the event. As you heard, this event is being recorded, so you're welcome to turn your video off if you prefer. With all that out of the way, I want to start out tonight by sharing who Massachusetts Appleseed is and what we do. Mass Appleseed's mission is to promote equal rights and opportunities for Massachusetts residents by developing and advocating for systemic solutions to social justice issues. We work with community members and pro bono partners using research to highlight social justice problems and propose solutions. And then we advocate zealously to implement those solutions so that everyone can exercise their legal rights and achieve meaningful access to critical services and opportunities. For many years, an integral part of our work has focused on dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline. Later in tonight's program, we'll go into much greater depth about what this term means. But in a nutshell, we're talking about the ways that school discipline practices like suspensions, expulsions, and school-related arrests disproportionately push students of color and students with disabilities out of school and into the juvenile and criminal justice system. Mass Appleseed has previously addressed these practices by publishing reports on the harmful effects of zero tolerance policies, and we have advocated for the passage of school discipline reform with the Chapter 222 Coalition. Then, in 2020, we collaborated with 2 other Appleseed centers in Kansas and Alabama to publish a report entitled Protecting Girls of Color for the School to Prison Pipeline. The report found that in Massachusetts, Black girls were almost 4 times as likely to experience exclusionary discipline compared to their white counterparts. To explore these disciplinary disparities in greater depth and to make this type of data accessible to everyone across the state, one of our first actions after we released that report was to collaborate with pro bono partner Edgeworth Analytics on creating an interactive, free, and public dashboard that revealed these types of intersectional disparities down to the district level in Massachusetts. The link to that dashboard can be found throughout our new report, and it's also being placed in the chat now. Later this evening, you'll hear more about how this tool works. In addition, after publishing our data-driven report in 2020, we also knew we wanted to engage in a follow-up study that explored the stories behind these statistics and that shed light on what these disparities actually looked like in the classroom. We wanted to engage with the why behind this data, but we also knew that it wasn't our place as white researchers to answer these follow-up questions alone. So in June of 2021, we brought together a community advisory board made up of students, advocates, school professionals, and representatives from numerous organizations across the state to collaborate with us on a more narrative-based follow-up study. This group would, over the course of a year, go on to develop our study's research questions, draft an interview guide, recruit students to interview, conduct these interviews themselves, and code the interview results, turning them into the findings and recommendations that make up the report we're here to talk about today. Now, before I turn it over to our community advisory board, I wanted to start out tonight's event by establishing who's here with us in the first place. We have 2 Zoom poll questions that are about to pop up on your screen. Who is attending this event? And where in Massachusetts are you from? You should see those questions on your screen now, and we'll give everyone about a minute to answer. My colleague Melanie, Director of Research and Policy, is reviewing the results as they come in. Melanie, can you tell us how it's looking?
I feel like a newscaster.
I know.
So in terms of who's here with us today, we have a lot of advocates and we have a lot of students and then a few teachers and administrators, parents, and a decent group of others who don't fit into any of these categories. So feel free to put in the chat what you're bringing to this space if you don't fit into any of those categories. And then in terms of where people are from in Massachusetts, a lot of Northeast Massachusetts, Boston, Cambridge, Lowell were just a few examples that we put in the chat, but that entire region is populous here. And then second to that, we have right now 20% are answering from Southeast Massachusetts, and then 8% from Western Massachusetts. So it seems to be a nice range of folks. If you haven't answered yet, we've got about 85% of people participating. So if there's anybody else that wants to, we'll give you a couple more seconds and then we will go ahead. But thank you so much for sharing a little bit with us about who's here today.
Yeah, and I want to add my thanks to all of you for showing up across industry sectors and across the Commonwealth. We really appreciate you all being with us here today. I think I'm seeing the results of the poll question right now. I think you all should be as well. Throughout the rest of tonight's event, you'll be hearing from our Community Advisory Board and from some of the students we interviewed about their experiences with this project, what our research found, and what they want you to take away. There will also be a reflection and discussion portion at the end of tonight's events, where all of you will have a chance to share your thoughts, questions, and what you hope to do with this information, which we'll all be unpacking together. And so we wanted to share with you the questions that will inform that discussion in the chat now. And that way you'll be able to keep these questions in mind as you hear about the findings in this study. And finally, I'd like to thank the Marion L. DeCrow Memorial Foundation for their financial support of this research project, and for the Boston Bar Foundation for their support of tonight's event. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce one of our Student Community Advisory Board members, Kai Hines, who will lead us off as we begin to hear directly from the Community Advisory Board about what this research process has been like and what they hope you all take away from our results, which we will present on later this evening.
Thank you, Deb. So Melanie and I have the honor of presenting the Community Advisory Board members. So I will introduce myself first. So I'm Kai Hines. I'm a student who goes to a predominantly white institution in Western Massachusetts. And this work is really important to me. I realized after a while that fighting within the institution alone wasn't getting me where I wanted to go. So I had to take a step back and work with more people, and I got to meet so many amazing people. So having this opportunity has just been overall amazing because I've learned so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kai. And I just have to shout out Kai here, who, in addition to being on this board, has helped plan a lot of this event. So we are so grateful for her time and expertise and vision. So thank you so much. And next up, I am going to call on Mariah to share a little bit about how she came to the advisory board, who she was representing, and a little bit about her experience with this group.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariah Wiggins, and I'm representing the NAACP New Bedford chapter, and that's actually who introduced me to the Mass Appleseed group. But I was also interested in joining this myself just because as a Black female who also has attended Boston Public Schools from kindergarten to 12th grade, I could just see myself in a lot of the young women that we interviewed. And I wanted to be able to pass it forward, I guess, to be that next person that could share their stories and help to make a difference. And I think if anything that we can take away from this, I just would like everyone who is on this call and people who read the report after this, to know that these are authentic stories from real girls living and attending schools here in Massachusetts. And unfortunately, their experiences are not unique. Their bravery, perseverance, and understanding of self at such a young age is really remarkable to me. I could see my younger self in many of their experiences, the versions of myself when I was too timid to speak up. And though I wish these scenarios were not still arising for young girls of color, I'm so proud to see them use their voices in this way. I also want to commend Mass Appleseed for taking the lead in this study and allowing individuals like myself to have the opportunity to play such a significant role in this unique experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah. So now, Thora, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Thora Henry. I am a student going into 11th grade. I go to Malden High, and this advisory board has brought in a lot of things to light for me. The whole reason I joined was because me personally, I've been through injustices at school. I've been discriminated against at school, And this was a new opportunity for me to bring other young Black girls of color and let them hear my story and have an opportunity to hear their story. And just knowing that I'm a part of that it just feels so, it's such a big accomplishment to say. And I'm glad that I got to meet everyone in this advisory board. And I'm so glad that we get to share our research with you because it is absolutely amazing. And I even learned things that I didn't know. And if I'm learning something new, you can definitely learn something new from this. And I just hope you take away something from the advisory board because we gave our all into this research. And just for you being here and looking at it, it means the world. So I hope you guys enjoy this.
Thank you so much, Thora, another amazing student member who has been a true leader and trailblazer in this work. We are so happy to have you here and to have been with you on this entire journey. So next, I'm going to introduce Ivana, another of our advisory board members, to speak a little bit about her involvement in this and her experiences. So I will throw it over to you, Ivana.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ivana Solano, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Love Your Magic, which is a grassroots organization that supports the healthy development of Black and Brown girls through self-love, self-advocacy, and sisterhood. As a former public school teacher, I experienced firsthand the ways in which Black and Brown girls were adultified and criminalized in school. My hope is that this report will provide you all with the opportunity to learn about the experiences of our girls in schools and inspire you to do your part in making sure that we can create safe spaces in schools and in our community where Black and Brown girls can show up as their authentic selves and thrive. I deeply believe the well-being of our girls is our collective responsibility, so I really hope that this moves you all to action.
Thank you, Ivana. That was really powerful and strong. And now I will Jalisa, if you could please introduce yourself, one member who's been super active.
Hello, my name is Jalisa. I am a student in Boston. I joined this group because I feel like as a Black girl myself growing up in the Boston school system, I feel like our voices aren't heard enough. And if it is heard, it's heard and then dismissed. So I feel like this program or this acts of activism was great to be in because it shows us that like we need to be outspoken and that we don't need to yell and have to fight without putting our point across on everything. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And I'll just point out now we've heard from Kai, Thora, and Jalisa, 3 student members who were so active. They were conducting interviews with me. They were in the trenches, and we are just so grateful for your voices and your leadership. So just want to highlight that crew over there. And with that, I am now going to turn it over to Hema. Thank you so much, Hema, for being here and speaking tonight.
Wow, thank you so much, all. My name is Hema Sarang-Saminsky, and I'm the policy director at Jane Doe Inc., which is the Massachusetts Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence. And so we're a coalition of 60 community-based nonprofits that really work to support survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, or dating violence, through hotlines, advocacy, shelters, all of that. And, we are just so honored to be part of this community advisory board. National data has shown that punitive school discipline practices really leave girls of color less safe, especially girls of color who are survivors of sexual harm, dating violence, and other harassment. And so this launch of this report, and I'm just so grateful for the voices and amazing participation of young folks who are directly impacted by these harmful practices. I think we're gonna really make it clear that Massachusetts has a lot of room to grow towards supporting the educational and kind of life goals of young people. And we're really so humbled by and proud of all this work, and look forward to continuing to push towards transformation in the state. So thank you.
Thank you, Hema, and I can't wait to push with you. Next, Fallon, if you can please introduce yourself. So Fallon's not here.
Oh, I see her. Are you having some problems with muting?
I don't know what's happening. I couldn't hear, I heard nothing that Moriah said at all. The computer keeps doing, I don't know what it's doing. But I can hear you now, and I think you can hear me as well. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Fallon Correa. I am a secondary school counselor out in Springfield, Massachusetts. This is my 15th year being a school counselor. I began, my story, I'm from Nantucket, Massachusetts, originally in Eastern Mass. And so I really wanted to have an opportunity to have a different type of experience professionally than from what I had from growing up. Not to say that my first suspension was in first grade, actually. But out in Western Mass, I began my career in the alternative schools. And so I had a unique opportunity of seeing the kids who were removed from a regular public school setting, by some of the practices that we were able to have research around. And something that I learned about the kids is that the teenagers are teenagers. And it's really important that, we kind of always keep that lens on, as well as some of the other things that it's really important to acknowledge as far as, levels of poverty, single parent households, the level of trauma that our students experience on a regular daily basis. It's not something that's a one-time thing. It's something that happens to our students and our kids constantly. And so, I got this opportunity from my college professor from a master's degree at Springfield College. She reached out to me, and her daughter is in the JD program at Northeastern, Maya. And so they thought that this would be something that spoke to kind of, my soul. And that's how I ended up meeting all the wonderful people that have spoken before me and being part of this great research.
Thank you, Fallon. And now, unfortunately, thankfully, Katora is here, but unfortunately, she does not feel well. So I will go on to say what her remarks were, because she wrote remarks for people. So she said, I Have a Future is a Boston-based youth organization that fights for full youth employment, juvenile justice, and equality. Every year since 2009, we advocate for increasing funding for youth employment to support youth jobs that provide professional development opportunities across Massachusetts. Our coalition, based of over 15 youth-focused organizations across the state, has fought and won increases in statewide funding for youth jobs from $4 million to $24 million. I Have a Future participated on the advisory board because youth leadership and voice is at the center of our work. Samantha Grady, an IHAF alum, specifically sought out to be a part of spaces that align with her identity and interest by working with groups like Massachusetts Appleseed to obtain better resources to help support BIPOC youth. Sam learned many aspects of conducting research and culminating data. This includes sharing her own experience and resonating with other girls of color on their experiences being discriminated against. From this, we've created a questionnaire interviews that collects people's experiences so that it can be made into laws. We hope that this research can continue to remove challenges and barriers to other girls of color continuously facing the brunt of an unjust system.
Thank
So-
you.
Go ahead.
Go for it, Kai. Oh, I guess I will. Thank you, Kai, so much for reading Katura's words. So Katura is the executive director of I Have a Future, and for a significant portion of our advisory board year-long commitment. One of the I Have a Future alum that she mentioned, Samantha Grady, has been a part of this, and when she had to change positions, we were able to get Katura involved. So we are so happy to have all of your partnership. I also just want to say thank you again to all of these incredible community advisory board members here. You can clearly see how fantastic they are. I'm sure you all, that's no doubt, but truly this research that we're about to share with you and break down with you would not be what it is without each and every one of them. They put so much of them into this work, and it would have been such a loss not to have them and their experiences in this. So we're just so grateful for their time and their energy and their expertise. And I can say personally, having worked with you all for a year, you are such incredible partners and collaborators. And I know I have learned so much from all of you, and that we've all learned so much from each other. So I am so appreciative of you all and of this space. I don't know, Kai, if you have anything you want to wrap up before we go to our next piece. I didn't mean to cut you off, so feel free.
Oh, you said it all. You're always so very heartwarming. I want to thank you too, Melanie, because Melanie gets stuff done. Melanie gets stuff done. It's like we'll have a meeting at like 8:30 p.m., maybe 9, and you get an email an hour later with like the whole Melanie. So thank you, because you your energy, and you're really motivational. So I thank you. I thank Emma Appleseed. And of course, I've met so many amazing people. So I thank you all too. And I hope to continue all of the friendships that I've made here.
Oh, thank you so much, Kai. So now what we're going to do, now that you've all heard from this group of people that created this report and this research that we're talking about, we're going to sort of go through and break down for you some of the key findings of all of the interviews that we did with students of color, female students of color across the state. And for anyone, if I go too fast, I get, passionate and I speed up. So feel free to motion at me as you need to slow down, because I know that that's not my strong suit. So before we jump in though, I'm going to be co-presenting these findings with Mariah. So Mariah, if you just want to briefly reintroduce yourself, I will share my screen and we will get started.
Hello again, everyone. Yes, I'll be co-presenting the findings with Melanie. And again, I am representing the NAACP New Bedford chapter. And I'm excited for you guys to see the summary of everything that we got to work on over the last year.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mariah. And Mariah was one of the folks that helped really dive into the data and code the results. So she is an expert on all of this. And so I'm so happy to be working with her to share what we found with all of you. So you've already heard a little bit about Massachusetts Appleseed, our research model, our policy area. So I'm going to sort of just jump into the next piece, which is, what are we talking about when we say the school to prison pipeline? This is sort of a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot, but what do we really mean? So as Deb mentioned before, we're talking about policies, practices, procedures that disproportionately push both students of color and students with disabilities out of the education system and into the juvenile and criminal legal systems. And as Deb mentioned as well, what we're really looking at is how the disproportionate use of suspensions, expulsions, and school-related arrests can very seriously impact a student's ability to feel welcomed in school, to be able to succeed in school. It increases likelihoods of dropout, and ultimately also then increases likelihood that you will then be involved in the juvenile or criminal legal systems. And there's a couple of names for this phenomenon, and that was sort of just a brief overview. There are other ways as well, but sort of to make sure we're all on the same page. But there are a couple of other terms for this as well. Some people refer to this as the school to confinement or cradle to confinement pipeline. And that distinction is really important because not all students are entering the juvenile criminal systems through prison directly. There might be other forms of detention or house arrest that still sort of fit under a term of confinement, but don't necessarily, meet with the sort of standard idea of what we say when we say prison. So we do acknowledge that there are other ways to talk about this work, but ultimately, because school to prison pipeline, sort of in the larger society is the most well-known term, that's what we continue to go with. But we really, when we're talking about this system, we're sort of including those other forms of detention as well. So we just wanted to set that out for you all. And then we also just sort of wanted to dive into a little bit of how Massachusetts Appleseed got into this project that we're currently in now. And so as Deb mentioned, in 2020, we worked with 2 other Appleseed centers, one in Alabama and one in Kansas, to do a comparative review of, in particular, the way that Black girls were experiencing disproportionate discipline in those 3 states. Now, this report was released in 2020, but at the time, the latest national data that we could compare equally for all 3 states was from 2015. But despite that limitation, we unsurprisingly saw very, very serious disparities across all 3 states. On average, across all 3 states, Black girls were 5.2 times more likely to be disciplined than their white female counterparts. In Kansas, that number was 6.2. In Alabama, that number was 3.7. And in Massachusetts, it was 3.9. So Massachusetts was actually slightly higher than Alabama, which I think was a wake-up call for some people when we like to think about where Massachusetts likes to pride itself on being in terms of education and equity, and maybe where we really are. But then when we looked and we dove a little bit deeper into these disparities in Massachusetts in particular, we saw that there were increasing disparities when it came to out-of-school suspensions and expulsions as well for Black girls in Massachusetts. And as Deb mentioned, we really wanted to do a follow-up that provided the stories behind these statistics, because this alone obviously doesn't tell the entire story. It doesn't show what's actually happening in our classrooms. And that's why we brought together our community advisory board. So I'm going to throw it over to Mariah to talk a little bit more about what the advisory board did, some of the things that you all worked on. So Mariah, feel free to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so being a part of the community advisory board, we actually were given a lot of responsibilities, which was really cool to be able to have such a leading role in this experience. So some of those responsibilities included identifying the research questions that we later asked the participants, drafting up the interview questionnaire, recruiting students to be interviewed, interviewing students with the help of Mass Appleseed. Definitely a lot of help came from Melanie in that. Reviewing and coding interview results to identify key patterns and findings. And so I really got to help a lot with that part, which was really cool, along with Jalissa. So that was a lot of fun being able to really break down our findings. We got to develop concrete policy recommendations, aided in the creation of this policy report. And then finally, we got to help with planning the community event that we're doing right now.
Thank you, Mariah. And I'll just say, this is an exhaustive list. There were a lot of responsibilities you all have, but it was so heartening to see that you were all really hungry for this. You really wanted to put yourself into it. I was sometimes worried that I was, asking too much, but everyone said, no, we want to be as involved as we can. And so I just really appreciated how you really did dive in with everything that you had. So thank you so much for that.
Okay, so as we were planning and putting the study together, we really based it on this one main question. Why are girls of color in Massachusetts disciplined at so much higher rate than their white counterparts? And so as we developed those questions, we've got a whole bunch of data back, and that is where we'll have our findings.
Yeah, and I'll just say as well, this was sort of the primary question, but if you look through the report, there was about 5 or 6 subsequent questions that really directed the scope of the study. And you all were absolutely influential in dictating what those were. A lot of questions about, self-expression for girls of color in particular, questions about culture and family life, things that don't always necessarily seem directly correlated to discipline, but obviously have a huge effect on the environment that girls of color are in that might then lead to disproportionate discipline. So that's a piece of this that is so directly influenced by all of you and your insights. So I just wanted to lift that up as well, those follow-up questions in the report.
Okay, so when we got all of our data back, it was a lot of data that we got. So we had to consolidate it into smaller groups so that the information could be more easily digestible. And one of those subsections was the school environment and how that affected how girls of color were being disciplined differently. One of the main things that we've seen that affected it was the school's curriculum. A lot of students felt as though the curriculum was anti-Black, and especially when it came to the history that they were learning, they didn't see themselves in that curriculum. Another thing the girls had spoke about was their school environment almost feeling hostile, especially when they felt that stereotypes of them being seen as like negative, as in loud or aggressive, would affect their school day. 65% of students actually didn't really feel they could get support from their teachers. Fortunately, though, they did have other members that were part of their school, like a counselor or a social worker or a coach that they could rely on to get that support. Girls also spoke about the lack of empathy within the teacher and student dynamic, and they felt as though they weren't really being understood. And they also felt like that could have also been due to the lack of diversity within the teachers at their schools. And they also, that led them to not maybe feel as comfortable speaking with those teachers about how they were feeling. And that also led to somewhat of a disconnect with some of the teachers being primarily white. Some teachers may have not had as much of a background in dealing with these students from diverse backgrounds. And sometimes things would come up that would maybe be interpreted to the student as inappropriate or offensive. And we have an example here for when one of the teachers actually referred to one of the students as being ghetto. And obviously that's not something a student would like to hear. But I would like to note before we move on that though these are, especially when it comes to the teachers, that these students did have these experiences, that this doesn't represent every single teacher that the students have at their schools, but this was just a big part that did stand out when we were getting our findings.
Thank you, Mariah. And just to add on to that, I do think, as we talk about, we mentioned in the report as well that some of that might be due to lack of training and burnout and the trauma that teachers have experienced as well. But ultimately, that doesn't excuse when there are these types of racialized biases that are coming out for our students that they're experiencing. We have to listen to them. We have to take that into consideration when we think about how we're supporting them and their environment. So the report does sort of acknowledge that it isn't obviously something that we only spoke to a certain number of students and this was their experience, but it's really important to still acknowledge those experiences in the classroom. So thank you, Mariah.
Okay, and this was another subsection of the findings that we had. So really looking into what the discipline looked like for students in their schools. One thing that we've seen that I was a little surprised by was a lot of students experienced being removed from the classroom, suspension at a very young age. 65% of those students actually were pushed out of the classroom in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and 35% experienced suspension or expulsion in 7th or 8th grade. And I guess I didn't realize that people were being pushed out of the classroom at such early ages. A lot of people that we also spoke with, they mentioned that a discipline was around the dress code. And that's where a lot of the inequity came about, where some of the female students or students of color also felt they were, not receiving the same treatment when it came to school dress code. For example, girls felt that their bodies were being policed a little bit more compared to male students, especially some students of color felt their body types may be a little bit different than their counterparts. And so they also tended to feel they were being policed a little bit more about their body types in the school dress code. Another thing that was really interesting that came up was the students didn't necessarily say that they didn't want to be disciplined, but they wanted the discipline to be equitable. And they felt as though in certain scenarios that the discipline wasn't equitable necessarily. And that came about to be very harmful to the students because certain students based off race, gender, or even both felt as though they were being disciplined differently compared to their counterparts for similar scenarios. And I guess this other bullet point I kind of missed over was a lot of the students also, when it came to the discipline, they felt as though they would have liked to be able to share their side of the story, to establish that ground of empathy and understanding. And they felt like they weren't given that opportunity to do that when that discipline was being given to them. And I think that was really important because it allowed me to see that like sometimes you have that idea that like, oh, the students just don't want to be disciplined, they don't want to listen, but that wasn't the case at all. They understood when these scenarios came about that discipline was needed, but they just felt as though that it wasn't being done fairly. So I'm going to hand it back over to Melanie.
Thank you so much, Mariah. And also just say there was one other point in here that I think is really important, which is that a lot of the sort of inciting incidents that led to discipline for the girls that we spoke to, it wasn't behavior on their own that led to discipline. It was sort of reactive behavior when they felt particularly disrespected or mistreated by a teacher or a student. And so that really shows that if it's, you know, realities of the school environment and ability to mediate when those types of inappropriate behaviors come up, that's really an important place for us to be looking, because on their own, you know, as the report says, they're just trying to learn, they're just trying to get their education, and it's these other factors that are sort of coming in and influencing them. So that was something that we saw over and over and over again when it came to sort of the causes of the direct incident that led to discipline. One other thing that we saw was that the long-term and short-term impact of discipline were very significant. So we were talking to students who were in, you know, high school and talking about these incidents when they were in 3rd grade, 5th grade, and it still had significant effects on who they are today. In the short term, a lot of students talked about how when they came back to school after a suspension or an expulsion, some teachers would sort of look at them differently. And the words that they said themselves were they would look at them as disruptive or even abusive or violent just because of the fact that they had returned from a suspension or an expulsion. So they sort of would return with this expectation on them from some of their teachers that they felt was very negative and they couldn't really get away from. But long term, students talked about how a lot of experiences that they were disciplined for tended to come from, you know, speaking an opinion in class that a teacher might not have agreed with. And so and then it's sort of escalating out of hand. And so a lot of students felt like when they returned, they couldn't be as outgoing, they couldn't talk as much as in class, they couldn't engage for fear of being disciplined. And so that obviously has huge implications if this type of discipline is really dimming the light of incredible students and their ambitions and their goals. And it's going to impact how they are, not just, you know, in elementary or middle school when they're disciplined, but in high school and beyond. So that was also something that we thought was really very clear when we spoke to the students that we did. And we also directly asked the students, what are you doing when you see this type of discriminatory behavior? And how do you think we should fix it? Because truly they're the ones that we need to be listening to. And so many students talked about how they've been setting up meetings with school leaders, they've had petitions to make changes, and sometimes that has been successful, sometimes it hasn't. And so ultimately, while they want to do that work on their own, and we applauded them in the report and continue to encourage that, there's also systemic change, obviously, that needs to occur, because this isn't on an individual level. We're really talking about school culture and school environment here. And so some of the things that they asked for directly that then directly are reflected in the recommendations of our report that you can review in both the executive summary and in the recommendation section a diverse teacher and administrative workforce that students can connect with better. We talked about that a little bit before, but students that are really explicitly looking for that, especially because there's such huge disparities in Massachusetts around that. Prioritization of the student voice. A lot of students asked for, listening sessions or forums or, student initiatives where they could talk directly to the administration about what they're seeing. And they felt like there wasn't really opportunities to do that at the systemic level. And then in addition, as Mariah talked about, in the short term, when students are engaging in particular behavior, they want to be able to explain their voice. They want to say why something might have happened, why they felt the need to act a certain way. In addition, a very clear theme of mental health supports and services. As we mentioned, a lot of students, when asked for sort of their primary support system, they first went to counselors, they went to social workers. And so having more of those types of supports for students and having those support workers be people of color was also something that came out a lot. But in addition, a number of students talked about, ways to implement greater mental health practices in the school day, having certain times for breaks or spaces where they can go and decompress between classes, or even, providing, one student asked for 3 mental health days a year because they tried to take a mental health day that they needed. They knew that they couldn't show up to class and work the way they needed to, and it was counted as an unexcused absence. The school didn't acknowledge that. And so if that practice could be in place, maybe students would be able to then come back to school refreshed. And as Mariah said, I think students, they didn't necessarily want suspensions and expulsions, but they wanted to be held accountable. If they knew that they made a mistake, if they knew they did something wrong, in their interviews, they acknowledged us, but they said, they acknowledged to us that what they might have done might not have been best in the moment. But instead of then just being thrown out of the classroom without an ability to reflect on what happened, it didn't really, they weren't really held accountable in a way that was positive. And so they really are looking for accountability for student behavior, but in a way that doesn't remove students from the classroom. And so it's not necessarily suspensions and expulsions that can get that, obviously, if they're just taken away. And then in particular, a number of students mentioned restorative practices or direct type of student mediation, conflict mediation, as an opportunity to do exactly that, to engage in a healthy and meaningful way. And I was really impressed that some of these students even knew that terminology. I definitely did not at that age. But they also said that it needed to be done correctly. One student spoke about a restorative circle that they were in where they felt like the student who had engaged in some racially discriminatory language didn't really actually leave the circle feeling like they had learned anything, like it had sunk in. And so it's not just a one and done situation. It's not just one instance of harm happens and then we do a circle, but it's about how can at the entire school and culture level, these types of culture changes and practices be implemented so that when harm is done, it can really be meaningful. And so that was also a very, very key theme. And with that, if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat. We will have a discussion portion at the end. So I think with that, we are going to go to the next portion of our event, which is, let me just get my agenda very briefly. We're going to be talking about that data dashboard that we mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation. And so to present that with me, I have some colleagues from Edgeworth Analytics, Sheila and Stephanie, and also one of our community advisory board members, Thora. So Sheila and Stephanie, do you guys want to introduce yourself? And then I will share my screen and we can get going.
Sure. So I'll go ahead. So my name is Stephanie Chang. I'm a principal consultant with Edgeworth Analytics. So I helped with this dashboard. But also I did go to school. I went to college in Massachusetts for 10 years for my undergrad and for my graduate school. So I was really glad to be able to be a part of this and be able to kind of give back to a community that I felt like I was, somewhat a part of, even though at a kind of an older age. So I'm really grateful to Melanie for all of the hard work that she's done on this. And the support that she's had, and that this kind of work is going on because it is such an important topic.
Hi, my name is Sheila Bonifay. I'm also a principal consultant at Edgeworth Analytics. I'm not from Boston. I did not go to Boston, but my daughter is going to Boston this semester as a first-year college student. So, yay! So we're very, very happy and honored, to be able to collaborate with Massachusetts Appleseed on this project. We're very, very excited, and this is very, this is a very good project to work on.
Thank you so much. And Thora, do you want to introduce yourself or quickly reintroduce yourself as well, since you'll be helping?
Yeah, my name is Thora. I am a high school student. I do activism on the side, and yeah.
So I am going to share my screen real quick. Can everybody see that? And I will do my best to remember to speak slowly and clearly. And I'm going to first throw it over to Sheila and Stephanie to give you a little bit of an overview of this tool. And actually, I'm also going to put the link to this website in the chat so that anyone that is interested in playing around with it directly, it should be there earlier, but if you joined late, putting that in the chat for you as well.
Sure, should I start? All right, so as I've said, I'm very, very happy. We're very happy and honored to be able to be a part of this project. And so in addition to helping Melanie with the understanding and analyzing the underlying data on the discipline rates for Massachusetts school districts, we also collaborated in creating an interactive dashboard. So this, as you can see in your screen, this is the interactive dashboard. This is a tool not just to analyze the data, but also to be able to effectively present the results in one place by providing a dynamic visual display of, the disparities related to the discipline rates of students across the Massachusetts school district. So these dashboards, as you go through the dashboard, you'll see various statistics related to the disciplinary rates at the school and the district level. At the same time, it is further broken out by a set of student characteristics, as you can see under where that mouse is hovering over. So there are characteristics such as the gender, the student's disability status, the student's socioeconomic status, and their English learning status. So as you make changes to any of these characteristics, changes would be reflected on the map and all the subsequent charts and graphs that you would see at the bottom, which Stephanie will be speaking more of in more detail.
I'm muted. There we go. Yeah, so to kind of start off, we have this map of Massachusetts. And as Sheila pointed out, it's currently showing the disparities for female students. So as you kind of toggle through those student characteristics, you can kind of change what groups you're comparing. So this is the map currently showing discipline rates between African-American, Black female students and white female students. And so you can kind of hover on any district and choose a specific district. So Needham is showing, or Boston. And this will give you more information specifically on the percent disciplined for these two groups of interest, and then what the difference is between them, as well as giving you the total number of students. So for those of you you're in Massachusetts, like some areas have much higher percentage of their student population is white. And so just to kind of be able to make sure these differences are not just because there's, only like one Black student at the school, we've added the student population there. And we've given you some statistics for each school district on more likely African-American / Black students are to be disciplined, and how much of the percent of disciplined schools do they account for. And then not only is this for comparing African-American / Black students to white students, you can also compare, so if you toggle down, other minority groups. I'm so sorry, my dog has decided to cause a little bit of chaos. But so that's the map, and I think I'll turn it back to Melanie. Are you doing the next parts? Great, I need to go make sure she doesn't.
So just to add on to what Stephanie has mentioned, so if you could see the legend at the bottom of the map from green to red. So I think the way we interpret this is the greener means the lesser disparity, and the more red means the higher the responsibility the disparity is. So if you hover on the very red area there, that means it has a very high disparity against the white students.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for clarifying that. And I will also just say there's one other really cool tool. There's a little search here. So if you want to put in a particular district, it'll zoom into wherever you search as well. So that's another way to use this tool. And then going down, there are two other amazing features here in this dashboard for your use. This here is for the entire state of Massachusetts. And then this over here, it looks the same because currently it's showing state totals, but is actually changeable depending on the district that you're interested in. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But as Sheila and Stephanie were saying before, currently, because we have the statistics showing female students here, this is showing for the entire state of Massachusetts various disparities compared to white students when it comes to the percentage of students disciplined across all of these racial categories, and then the number of students that make up these categories that are for the entire student body, and then the disciplined student body. So you can see very clearly in a visual way that there are significant disparities across the entire state when it comes to the percentage of white female students that are disciplined compared to students of color. You can see it through this graph. You can see it through these side-by-side comparisons. You know, for example, we have here Hispanic or Latino female students make up 20% of the statewide student body, but 37% of students disciplined. And Black students make up 9%, Black female students make up 9% of the student body, but 19.4% of students disciplined. So it's just a very clear way, an accessible way to show that these disparities do exist, that the stories that we're hearing from these students are based in statistical reality across the entire state. And then you can also hover over these graphs as well, and it shows you the number of students that are disciplined in all of these categories compared to white students across all levels. So now I'm going to throw it over to Thora to talk a little bit about how this can be used by comparison at the district level.
Yeah, so as Melanie said, it is pretty similar to the first graph, except you can search for your specific district. So we are going to, for example, we're going to do Boston, as for that is where we got most of our students from and interviewees. So if you look, you can see the discipline rate of white students, which is 0.3%. And as you said, if you click, you could do the district overall, or you can do African Americans, Hispanic, multi-race, etc. And same thing on the other side with the kind of pie chart looking things. So you can do overall students, or with the racial composition of all students, or you can do the ratio to disciplined students. So this is just a good overall tool to, you can just check from where you're from to see, you know, what's going on in my city, what's going on in my district. And this is across the board. They have everywhere. They have Malden, Everett, Framingham. It's pretty widespread. So you can use this, you know, just to look something up. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Thora. And I will say, for those interested in this data in particular, we have an About the Data section that talks about, this is data that we requested specifically from DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, from their 2017-2018 school year data. So this explains what they mean by all of these categories and has more information if you're interested, if you're a little bit of a data nerd and want to know more about where this all comes from. So this is linked throughout our report, but is also a separate tool that you can access completely on your own at any time, completely free and available for you all to use, to go speak to your teacher, your principal, your superintendent about. And again, we're happy to answer any questions. If there are any, you can put them in the chat, and then we will go ahead and discuss them at the end of this event. And with that dashboard presentation, we're now going to get to hear from some of the students who were directly interviewed for this report. They're going to speak a little bit about their experiences, and we'll have some questions and discussion for them. So I am going to throw it over to Kai, who is going to facilitate this section with me, and we will go from there.
I'm so glad that I'm able to facilitate this section, because I really felt like I got to connect with the interviewees. And I think it's a really different experience to see your experience, but coming from somebody else that you have never met, and still being able to connect so well with what they experienced and their story and their upbringing. So I'm really honored. So Anne, if you can please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Anne, a rising sophomore at Chelsea High School, and I'm 15 years old.
You can tell us a little bit about what school you're from. How did it feel being interviewed, or like, tell us why you chose to sign up for the interview.
I chose to sign up to be interviewed for the research because there's not many Black girls in my school that would like want to be part of something like this. And if they are Black girls in my school that wanted to be part of it, they just didn't have time. So like my cousin, she wanted to do it, but she was very busy. There was a part of you where I felt like, I mean, not part of it, but most of it, I felt like anxious and
We can come back to
I
you.
felt
You'll get your
anxious
question.
and nervous because like usually like when I'm getting interviewed, I don't really like, it feels awkward because like I barely get interviewed. But something that I wanted to come out of this, or like me being part of it, is like people understanding that Black girls who went through stuff like this are human, and like we deserve to have people in our community that care about us and like our experiences. And like whenever people are listening to us, it's not them listening and then it going through one ear and coming out of the other. So yeah.
Thank you, Anne. And now Najida, if you can please introduce yourself, and you can say a little bit about who you are, if you feel like sharing what school you go to, and why you're here today.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Najida. I am a rising, or let me say incoming, freshman for UMass Dartmouth. The reason why I chose to be a part of oh my God, sorry, excuse my stutter. But the reason why I chose to be a part of the pipeline, of the school to prison pipeline for girls of color, I thought it was very important for me to get my voice out and to also kind of have this discussion and have this topic spoken on, since I feel like it's something that is honestly overlooked, especially for girls of color in school settings. So I definitely thought it was very important, and I feel like it was an important discussion to have amongst different, I don't know how to like really put it in words, but amongst like different people, in order to express like how I felt also like about being or experiencing this, or having that be a part of my experience. So I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that, and so that other people can also hear my story and see my perspective and ways or things that we can do to implement a different schooling system for a better future for our upcoming kids.
Thank you, Najita. So now I really just want to make an open space for Anne and Najita to kind of have a conversation between themselves. So I'll of course pose questions, and you ladies can feel free to respond to each other's comments or thoughts or feelings. So please. Um, so I'll go on with the first question, if everybody's ready. So what is your initial reaction to what the other, oh, yeah, what is your original reaction to what the other students shared just now for the introductions, like about the experience or about how they introduce themselves?
I thought that hearing her experience, I feel like it's very important just for the simple fact of I know that she stated like not having it go through one ear and out the other, because I feel like a lot of times girls of color, our voices aren't fully heard or echoed. So I definitely thought like that was an important piece that she had stated. And to even like elaborate on that part also, I feel like a lot of times like we're kind of overlooked in the sense of like we don't fully have feelings, or we're not able to express ourselves because we're always correlated with one emotion, which is anger. So yeah, I definitely agree with her on that part, and I definitely can empathize with her also.
For my part, I didn't really hear what Najita said, but if you could repeat like a little bit of what you said, like about your experience and stuff.
Oh, I was saying that my experience, like with the interview, I honestly, I had a good time. I was happy that I was able to echo my voice or have my voice heard and my opinion heard, just for the simple fact of girls of color, a lot of the times were overlooked in the school system and very misunderstood. So I definitely enjoyed having this interview because I feel like it's also very informing to others who are also like listening in on this, and also hearing from another person's personal experience from what they have went through or being within the school system.
I think that you liking going through the interview process is good because like it makes you feel more comfortable to share like things that you've never shared, or like just overall being comfortable.
Thank you. So moving on to the next question, which you guys kind of already went over, but can you explain or like talk more about how you felt during the interview process? How did you feel in the beginning? Like, how did you feel in the middle? How did you feel in the after? Like, just unpack that first, please.
I would say I just wanted to start off, but I would say like in the beginning, starting off, I was a bit nerve-wracked just for the simple fact of I didn't know what the questions would contain or be about. Also thought it was a little nerve-wracking for the simple fact of it being recorded, but after the fact, I was like content with it. I was fine. Throughout the middle of our discussion or the questioning, I slowly started to become more comfortable just for the simple fact of I know that my voice is being heard, like I had stated before with my two interviewees that were interviewing me. So my interviewers that were interviewing me. So I definitely felt more comfortable along the way, like in between the middle of the session, because I felt like I was being heard and understood. And then I would definitely say towards the ending, like I said before, I was very content with what I had said because I was able to get everything off my chest in full honesty of my experience and what I have been through. So I would definitely say that.
My experience is like similar, like about the feeling content after, because I was like anxious before because like I had never been interviewed for something like this, and it was like awkward at first because like um, every time they asked the question, I kind of didn't understand what they were saying, what the interviewers were saying, so they had to repeat it, and like we just had to keep going through that process for like all the questions, kind of. But it was like uh, I found the clarity of like me saying all that stuff after the interview was over. So yeah.
I also want to add on, sorry to interrupt you. I
No,
also want
go
to add
for it.
on, I feel like it was very eye-opening towards the end in the sense of, I feel like a lot of times people, or I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like majority of the times people kind of overlook, or in the sense, kind of skip over that feeling of things that they have went through, or their experience that they have went through in the past. So I definitely feel like this was definitely eye-opening, as Anne had stated. I feel like it was very eye-opening in the sense of like being able to talk about my past and what I've actually been through, and also having that sort of realization of the simple fact of like, this is an issue and it needs to be addressed, not only from my experience, but also other people's experiences that I've seen like first on like experience or like witnessed, and also like have heard from like different people also like how their experience was in a schooling system too. So I definitely feel like there was a big realization after, like, these are the type of conversations that we need to be having with young girls. And yeah, so I definitely want to say that.
Thank you so much, Sajida, and thank you so much, Anne. I apologize if you hear my dog, but you shouldn't. And just to piggyback off of that, I think the fact that you guys are here to share your stories is so important, because, and what Anne was saying as well earlier, where you didn't understand the question, so you had to ask like for it to be repeated. In classrooms, like Black girls are so widely unsupported that the vocabulary needed to advocate for ourselves and for us to clearly say what we need in the classroom isn't even provided, right? Because Anne wasn't the only person. I remember we had conversations in our meetings that we need to make sure that the vocabulary is understandable for like the age group that we are going for. So I don't know, that was just something that also just came to like reality, that this isn't taught. Like this is information that we all need and that we don't all have. So thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you so much to Anne and Ajita. I know I've been texting you a bunch about, getting here tonight, but I'm so happy. I think everyone can agree. We are so grateful. We hear you and we value you and your voices so much. And with that, we have about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to bring Fallon back in over here with me to sort of open it up to all of you that have here and that have stuck it out for this hour and a half with us. What are your thoughts? What are your questions? What are the comments that you all want to make? Anyone, feel free to use the chat, raise your hand. We have a couple of discussion questions that we shared with you in the beginning of this event that we are going to reshare right now. But yeah, anyone that wants to jump in, I'm going to throw it over to Fallon to potentially set a couple of sort of expectations or protocols. And then I see Anne's hand is raised, and I definitely want to hear more from Anne. So I'll throw it over to Fallon quickly, and then please use the chat, raise your hand, and tell us what you're thinking.
Hi, can you hear me? Oops. Okay, sorry. I was on my phone so that I could hear everything. So I'm gonna make this really quick, only because I know we're running out of time, and I want people not to lose their thoughts. So just want to, again, thank you guys for staying on with us this long and listening to our young women speak and just their experiences. So for our discussion tonight, Mel is gonna post the questions. They've been posted in the chat. I also have them behind me on my screen. I'm gonna ask that what we call have one mic. So that's one voice at a time. Please wait for the speaker to finish before you kind of like interject with what you'd like to say. The best way of doing that maybe is to wait like a 3-second space just to make sure they're done speaking. You can build on ideas. So 3 ways to do that is to add on to, I have a connection to, or to piggyback on. I know Kai was using that one, just to help build onto the ideas that others may have, and make sure you're thanking each other for your contributions. You're going to use the hand raising emoji that you can find down at the bottom of your screen. And so where are we here? I am going to go up to the first question. I'll read the first question and then we can begin. Have you, your child, a family member, or anyone close to you experienced disciplinary action from their school? If so, what has that impact been?
Thank you so much, Fallon. And I'll just say, if anyone wants to respond to that question and any other questions, or again, post in the chat. And then I saw a couple hands were raised. Anne, I'd love to hear from you again. And then I think Ashley's hand might have been raised as well afterwards.
Yes, one of my family members has been disciplined at a very, very young age. And it impacted him in a way that, like, from what I see, because we don't really hang out anymore, that like he's very quiet and like doesn't talk to people, but like it's not in it's not in like a shy or introverted way. I feel like it's in a way where he's quiet because he knows that if he ever tries to like stand up for himself, that they're just gonna deny him of his feelings because of what he's done in the past. And like, even though at a very young age, like even though it was at a very young age, he still has those traumas, and I believe that he hasn't faced them yet. So it's very sad and like hard to see a family member go through.
Does anyone else? Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing that. If anyone else wants to respond to that or answer another question, please do just jump in, unmute yourself. If no one else is speaking, raise your hand and we'll call on you. There's a few questions in the chat as well from Janet. Thank you, Janet. If anyone wants to answer those, particularly any of the students on the call, questions about, at your disciplinary meeting or hearing, did you have any other alternatives to suspension or expulsion that were offered? And were you able to keep up in schoolwork? So any of those questions or any of the questions in the chat. Or again, any also just comments or feelings that you have from today that you wanted to share.
I definitely want to answer the question with the discipline meeting / hearing at school. Did the principal or school administrator offer any other consequence? I would definitely say, off of my personal experience, no. They basically just kind of like decide it for you in the sense of your action or whatever the situation had occurred. Like they base it off of that. So they're the ones that are kind of like dictating that over you, like this is what you're gonna get for this. And I feel like a lot of times too, it does come off unfair, just for the simple fact of I know in a lot of situations it's always a child that doesn't have much to do within the situation but still gets a consequence off of somebody else's action, which I also feel like it's unfair, because I feel like a lot of times, from my personal experience again, in middle school, anytime there was a situation, it's kind of just like there's no how can I explain it? There's nothing in depth. There's nothing done in depth in the sense of being able to go around and ask questions. It's kind of just like off air. Whatever they hear, they go with it, instead of asking questions and figuring out what actually had happened from each and every student. I feel like a lot of times they just go off what they believe, and then they just go from there, basically off the consequence. And I feel like a lot of times, for me personally, again, my consequences within my middle school, I don't feel like it equaled to the action, I feel like a lot of times the consequence was kind of not overruled in a sense, but in the sense it was just, I feel like it was just too much. I don't think it was fair or right for the action. I feel like they could have been a little less strict with it. And I would definitely say I definitely do see a difference within the discipline system within suburban schools and also within urban schools. Me personally, I've also went to a suburban high school and an urban middle school. So I definitely seen the big difference there in the sense of how teachers respond to their students and also how administrations and principals respond to their students and how they cater to their students. So I would definitely say within urban communities, I feel like a lot of times the school systems are way too strict. And what makes it worse is a lot of times we have white teachers talking down on Black students within those urban communities, which honestly makes it not look too pretty. And meanwhile, within suburban schools, a lot of times like their actions aren't given a consequence that's equivalent to the action. A lot of times it's less than, or it's just a slap on the wrist, and it's kind of just like you can go about your day, but just don't do it again. And it's not the same or it's not equal to urban discipline.
Can we go to Ashley and then Eric and then Anne, back to Anne.
Hi, so I just quickly wanted to say that I found it really interesting about what the research said about, or what students said in the interviews, that they felt that they were being disciplined over things like the way that they dressed, because it took me back to when I was in high school and how a lot of Black girls were sent home for wearing a skirt that was too short or wearing a tank top, and you would have their white peers wearing very short skirts, very short shorts, tank tops as well, and they wouldn't be sent home. And I remember this one incident where one of the Black girls stood up to the vice principal and asked him, well, why can't I wear this, but she can? And he said, well, because you have different bodies. And I think it's just very interesting because even like as a Black woman, you still see this happening in the workplace. You can see like white peers wearing things that may be considered inappropriate, and you could be wearing the same thing, but because your body is different, you're going to be looked at differently, which it really, to me, it's like it's not necessarily my body is different, is that you have this image of me, you're over sexualizing me because I'm a Black woman, or you're over sexualizing a Black girl, which is extremely scary for a grown adults to be doing that. And that's the real issue, is that they have this idea in their mind about Black girls and Black women.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And that's exactly what these students were saying. And we talk about in the report, this idea of adultification, right? That there are these sort of, expectations that are put on young women of color, like you just said, that are extremely inappropriate and problematic. And it is happening to the students that we spoke about. Almost every student brought this up without even having a question specifically about dress code. Almost every student brought this up when we spoke to them. And I think Fallon called on Eric next and then Anne afterward. And I know we're almost at 8 o'clock, but I'm happy to stay on. Any of you that are interested, please stay on. We won't keep you for too long, but I think this is an important conversation. I know a lot of you probably do too. So if you are available, we are welcome to hold this space for a little bit longer for anyone interested in staying.
Excuse me. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm open. I am being spoken here and heard. I'll try to be brief and respect for people's time. I know my daughter thinks I'm crazy about that. But Thora is my daughter. First and foremost, I want to say that I am extremely proud of the way that she's found her voice. And it's not necessarily directly because of her, but well, it is directly because of her, but actually our journey began with her brother and with one of his teachers in 8th grade having to spell his name incorrectly for 2/3 of the first quarter of school. And yeah, so discipline is training. I'm a Navy, 20-year veteran of the United States Navy. Discipline is training. Anything other than that is abuse. You have to come, and self-discipline is unexcusable. There has to be self-discipline, and that has to be even within our own students and within ourselves, even to recognize that when we need to push back and stand up to authority. I am definitely not surprised by the results of this, and I'm just, well, I guess I would say that I was somewhat surprised, not by Alabama's results that they were lower than Massachusetts, but surprised, I think it was in keeping with my thoughts, is that this is the populace in Alabama is probably a wee bit more subservient than they are in the liberal state of Massachusetts. With my surprise, maybe I will get this with the opportunity to delve more into the information, but I was surprised by, maybe it wasn't the focus of this, but I was wanting to see some proposed solutions to the many myriads of problems that you're presenting here. I pity the fool who would argue with this data, but I am an engineer, so don't just bring problems, bring solutions as well. So I look forward to delve into the data with that. And the last question, what do you want to do with this information? I've already shared the dashboard with the entire school committee and the mayor of Malden, Massachusetts, since we've been on this phone. I'm on this call, and yeah, I'm that guy. And Thor's my daughter. Yay. Thank you. Thank you, Melanie, and a couple other people. And Erga, she's on this call because we came to this forum because of people who were able and willing to stand in the breach. And we need more of those people. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I will say the report does have about 30 specific recommendations for things that we want to see changed. We thought it would be a little bit extensive to go through every single one of them tonight, but if you go through, it's on one of the first pages in the executive summary. We list them all, and we have a paragraph about each of them at the end of the report. And as sort of Deb said in the beginning, we don't just write reports and move on. Our next step after this report is released is to work with everyone in this advisory board and more to actually implement some of those recommendations. So we are very, very committed to working on solutions. I think we just have so many ideas that we wanted to sort of talk about the data, but I really, really appreciate, and I know everyone is applauding for sharing it with Malden. I think if every school committee had that dashboard, I think that would be a huge step in the right direction.
Oh, and I'm so absolutely giddy with the opportunity. Looking forward to sharing the entire report with them. And yeah, I'm a big guy. I can take it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then I think Anne was next. If Anne, you still want to jump in, and anybody else put things in the chat if you would like to stay on. I know we're over, but for all of you that are here, we really, really appreciate it.
Wanted to answer the question. Let me go up first. It said, were you surprised by any of the information shared today? And I was surprised by like one, I forgot who it was, but someone faced suspension in the first grade. And I was like, I thought that me facing suspension in 5th grade was bad. And I was just looking at their situation. Crazy. It's like, especially being so young and you don't even know what's going on. It's like crazy to think about.
Also, I would like to add a disclaimer. I feel like a lot of the times, especially within urban communities, in the sense of their students being Black students, I feel like a lot of times kids don't realize what type of system that they're being like implemented into. So I feel like a lot of times adults can take their authority and just abuse it or abuse their power because they're dealing with younger children.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to, you know, share any thoughts that they had? I know I can see people talking in the chat.
I'll also just uplift what Deb said. If anyone wants to get involved as we try to advocate for a lot of the changes in the report, you can reach out to anybody connected with Appleseed or this community advisory board. Yeah, Deb just said it. Shoot her an email, shoot any of us an email. The more people are working on this together, the more we can actually address this. So. If there aren't any final comments, please feel free to continue in the chat. I might throw it over. Oh, I see one more, Lorraine.
And I guess I can show my face right now. Hi, can everybody hear me?
Hi.
Hello, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing this. I received this from a colleague of mine. I work in a female juvenile detention facility, and we have a lot of these conversations, but I was really just blown away by all the data. Very impressed by the young ladies that stepped up and participated. Thank you so much. I really appreciated hearing your voices. I wish I could have shared this with the young ladies that I work with. A lot of the girls in my program, they share some of these same experiences and they talk about this. So I have like so much that I want to go back and do with the girls in my program, but I absolutely will be reaching out to you ladies, because I would love to be more involved in this. But really, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing this, and for the young ladies that I think it was, I try to remember names, Mariah, Thora, Ivana, Jaleesa, and Kai. Thank you so much. You guys did a wonderful, wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That means a lot.
Well, if no one else has any other comments, we don't want to keep you any longer. I know that we've been here for a long time. I do want to just reiterate what some of the other folks have said already about how grateful we are to all of our students who participated, whether they be, well, to everybody who helped, but especially the students, whether they be CAB members or interviewees, and especially for those of you who spoke out tonight and who helped prepare for tonight's presentation. This has just been such an amazing discussion. And as I said in the beginning, I'm really excited to continue to work with you all to try to use this report and this data to make change here in Massachusetts. So again, thank you all so very much. And you'll be hearing from us again soon.
Thank you all so much.